You're listening to Seek Travel Ride, a podcast which shares the stories of people taking bike adventures all over the world, and I'm proudly supported by Red White Apparel. They're a small independent brand, and for the last 10 years they focus wholly and solely on making the most comfortable bib shorts on the market. I've been using their bib shorts on my long rides lately, and they're a total game changer. Support the brands that support this podcast. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more about Red White Apparel. Now, on to the episode. Hello everybody, it's Bella Malloy here, host of Seek Travel Ride, and welcome back to another midweek episode where I hope to fuel your stoke for bike travel with some inspirational stories. This week we've got a big update from Olly Hargreaves. Olly set off a few months ago now from his home in the UK, destination of Thailand, and his updates is going to take us through his experiences of cycling through Turkey and into Georgia. Before we get into Olly's updates, I wanted to give you some updates of people I've been dot watching, previous podcast guests who are all doing some phenomenal challenges. Last week I was speaking about two dots that I am tracking specifically in the transcontinental race, and that was of Stevie Tisson and April Drage. Now I'm sad to report that April Drage has had to scratch from the TCR. It was very early on in the race. She had a really unfortunate crash. It was sort of insignificant, as April mentioned, but unfortunately sustained some pretty bad damage to the tendon in her thumb, which had left her unable to sort of really grip the handlebars. So April's transcontinental race was over very, very quickly. She's been repatriated back to Australia, and listeners, let's all keep our fingers and toes crossed that she gets a good prognosis and a speedy recovery, because I'm certain April will be taking on some massive bikepacking routes to come. Now, I did catch up with Stevie Tisson as she rolled through my area here in France. I spotted her just after she had completed the climb of the Col d'Aubisque-en-Salor, and she had descended. It was early in the morning. She had some miserable weather for those climbs, and it was all fog-bound. So when I saw her, she was dripping wet and freezing cold. I sat across from her as she had a nice coffee and some pastries to warm up. I then took off up the road with the plan that if I timed it well enough, I would see her as she climbed somewhere on the Col de Tourmalet. I took my cowbell with me, and I didn't just see Stevie. I think I must have seen over 50 transcontinental riders that day, and each of them I gave a nice cheer to. I got a few smiles, a few thank yous, and a lot of people that were just looking completely empty as well. So hopefully the little allay and the cowbell noise helped spur them on a little bit. I saw Stevie on the Tourmalet and wished her well. And then I waited around for a little bit longer because I saw two other dots, a team of two, belonging to Chris Hunt and Benjamin Worm. And I actually met Chris and Ben at the same event that I met Stevie at. It was my first ultra race, the Normandy Cat 900. And so I stuck around and cheered them both on as well. And I just sort of reflected that that whole day, that really occurred because I had taken on an event where I'd met these three people, and to be able to cheer all of them on the same race, yeah, it was kind of special. Now, Stevie, Chris and Ben at the time of recording are almost at the start of the third parcours, so it will be amazing to see their continued progress on this event, and it blows my mind at how far they have gone, let alone the race leaders. My goodness. Listeners, I can't even fathom the speeds at which they are travelling. Anyway, if you're also into dot watching and you're checking out the Transcontinental, make sure to give all three of them a look and track their dots and progress across the race course. Speaking of dot watching, Stevie's husband Tom Tisson, has also just started his own ultra. He's doing part of the North Cape 4000. Now, he was part of the start, which began in Berlin, and he's well and truly into Sweden. And it's quite something to be tracking both of their dots in different events. So, allay, Tom, go well. Now, the dot watching doesn't end there, listeners, because London has just kicked off. This is an Audax event, which is over 1,500 kilometres long and does exactly what it says on the tin. It goes from London up to Edinburgh and then back to London again. We have another previous podcast guest who is taking this event on, and that is Isabella Murtagh. Make sure to give her a follow on Instagram, where she is sharing in her stories the visual pictures behind every control point that she gets to as she makes her way along that incredible route. Allay, allay, allay. Okay, now it is time to listen to Olly Hargreaves share what it's been like through as his adventure continues on through Turkey and Georgia.
Hey Bella, last time I left you, I think I just set up camp after seeing some tombs and stuff. So the morning afterwards was about 5 minutes in before I was stopped by a police officer and given some coffee. He said kind of take your time and have as much rest as you want. So I chilled with him for a bit and set back off. Had a day of kind of cycling over the mountains and stuff, and then bumped into these two guys cooking up some really nice food on the side of the road, and they invited me over and gave me some food and said, "Oh, do you want a drink?" I said, "Oh yeah, that would be really nice, thank you." And they poured me this really strong whiskey and Red Bull type drink, which they then had to disappear off suddenly and kind of left me on the top of this mountain that I had to cycle down after 2 whiskeys, which was quite an interesting ride back down. Anyway, made it kind of back over another hill, a little bit merry, and then found a little spot to camp for the night. Set back off the next day and made it to Kulu, where again another massive show of kindness. I arrived in the city and stopped, and this guy from a fruit market came out and gave me a load of apricots whilst I was waiting at a red light. I got across the road just to check my maps to make sure I was going the right way. And one guy came out with some water, another guy came out with some coffee, another guy came out and went, "Are you hungry? Do you want a kebab? I'll get you a kebab." And then went off and came back with his kebab and said, "Sit here and enjoy." So that was really nice. And then I made my way over to this little lake near Kulu where I'd seen that there were loads of flamingos. So I made camp there, which was a really spectacular camp and one that I definitely will remember. The next day I set off and I was heading towards the salt lakes in the middle of Turkey. I ended up getting a flat tyre actually in literally the middle of nowhere, and another cyclist cycled past, and it was actually a guy that I'd bumped into on the ferry from Istanbul, and he was going a different way. We didn't end up cycling, but we said, maybe see you on the road, thinking, it probably wouldn't happen. And then here we were in the middle of a little village in the middle of nowhere and bumped into each other again. So we decided to cycle together, explored the salt flats, which was really cool, and got to the other side where we got a kebab and talked about what routes we were both thinking of taking and decided we'd stick together until Cappadocia. Had really, really good time cycling with him. He was called Nathan. He's a French cyclist. We went and visited loads of caravanserais along the way and got chased by massive kangaroos and visited underground cities before getting to Nevşehir and the Cappadocia area. We spent the final night camped up just next to Uçhisar and woke up to an amazing view over Cappadocia with all the balloons, which was really something special to see. And then we parted ways as my girlfriend had flown out to visit me for a week in Cappadocia. I cycled over in the morning to the hotel, and then I had a good week with my girlfriend as a rest. We kind of explored the whole area, and it was really nice to give myself a proper bit of time off, because coming down through the whole trip, I'd only had 3 rest days. So it was really nice to have a bit of time off and get to see the sites properly. And we explored all the carved out villages and cities, and I went all over the area to Görem and to Nevşehir and all over Uçhisar, and managed to get a balloon ride, which was really something quite special. Definitely a bucket list moment. After having the week off in Cappadocia, said my goodbyes to Ellie on the morning of the Sunday, trying to sort out what my route was and all that kind of stuff. So I stayed at the hotel and decided I was going to try and get to Kayseri, which was about 80 kilometres away, because I'd heard there was a bike shop that let bikepackers stay for free. So set back off and really pushed it, which was a bit difficult after having a rest week. Met a guy on a motorbike that stopped me on the side of the road, gave me some water and some bear spray and told me to use it on bears, dogs or drunk people. The next day, I kind of headed more into the mountains and off the beaten track and on these really wild roads where there was literally nobody for miles. I got stopped for lunch outside this place and was invited in for strawberries, and then they said, oh, wait here, and then disappeared in the car for 10 minutes and came back with a massive plate of food. The people in Turkey are so kind and really try and give you kind of everything that they have. It's really quite something special to have witnessed. The next couple of days were quite similar, kind of cycling through very deserty areas, and I made it over to Kangal, which is where the name of the dogs comes from. And the mascot of the city is the dogs and stuff, so that was quite interesting to go through. I actually bumped into another couple of cyclists, which I met in my rest week in Cappadocia, a German girl called Vesna, and she was cycling with another bloke called Tamino. They were planning on doing the Dark Canyon the day after, and we cycled up through Dark Canyon together, or Kamali Canyon, and it was really spectacular actually. Very, very interesting road that had been carved through the rock. Yeah, it was a really spectacular road to do. So did that with them and headed over to another campsite which they let bikepackers stay for free again. And I saw my brother's note on the wall and Malachi's from when they both stayed there. I'd been sent another message from a French cyclist. So he joined us and then we cycled together. The morning after we parted ways because the two German cyclists wanted to head up to the Black Sea. So we decided to split up and do our separate routes. But it was really nice cycling with Esther and Tamino. Yeah, me and Paul kind of stuck together for quite a while. Actually, we ended up cycling all the way to Georgia together. I tried to get my chain changed because it had stretched a little bit and I needed to change it over before it kind of did any damage to my bike. But it was a Sunday and all the shops were closed, so it was a nightmare. I was walking around every bike shop in the city and nowhere was open, and the ones that were open didn't have any chains. The morning after, we headed into the city so that I could try and get a chain, which fortunately the first shop that we went to was perfect and managed to swap the chain over. And then we went to a shop to get a bit of food for the next day and bumped into these Kurdish lads that were studying at the university there, and they invited us in for coffee, and we went up and coffee turned into a load of food, and they brought out some wine and all this kind of stuff, and they were really, really kind. They explained all the difficulties that they have as Kurdish people in Turkey, and we had this conversation with them that was really quite eye-opening and a very different kind of side of Turkey that I'd not really obviously experienced. We cycled again into kind of the middle of nowhere, and the scenery kind of turned into this Scottish Highlands type area, and it was really nice. And we stopped at a mosque for lunch. This storm rolled in from absolutely nowhere that was really unexpected, and it started hailing on us with hailstones the size of Maltesers. We kind of waited out the storm there for a little bit before heading back off, and then made it over to the other side where there was another massive storm coming in. We decided again to try and seek shelter in a mosque, and then set off the next day where we were warned about bears, which we were quite excited for because we really both wanted to see bears. But we had, again, a beautiful climb up to, I think, nearly 2,400 metres through woodlands and stuff. It was a real change of scenery from the Turkish kind of desert areas, but we didn't actually see any bears. But we bumped into a Dutch couple that were cycling from the Netherlands to Japan, so we cycled in with them, and that was really nice. We were cycling along this kind of gravel road, and this big storm was brewing in the distance, and they all kind of got a bit antsy about it. And they said, oh, let's ask these guys in this little tiny village if there was anywhere to stay. They said, oh, yeah, you have to go to the next village. There's nowhere here, basically. And then they said, oh, we can drive you in if you want, to which I was a little bit reluctant. We put the bikes on the back and it was all fine, and we drove in. It was only 7 kilometres away or something. Suddenly the guy stopped the car and looked out the window and went, oh, shit. And one of the bikes had fallen off, and we jumped out the car and had a look. And the girl's bike had fallen off and my bike was nowhere to be seen. I was instantly like, what the hell? Like, what on earth has happened here? You know, how far back is my bike? How, like, damaged is it? And all this kind of stuff. I just kind of took off sprinting down the road and managed to find it. with one of my panniers that had also fallen off. It was like a kilometre back on the road, maybe a little bit more, and it completely snapped my pedal and bent it completely out of shape, really scuffed up and bent my seat and a pannier rack and all this kind of stuff that was really not too good. They were like, oh, do you want to get back on the wagon for the last 3 kilometres? I was like, no, I'm not getting back on that. If my bike falls off again, who knows what's going to break. I was in a bit of a crap mood. I really couldn't get myself out of this bad mood because of this thing that had happened, because it wasn't my fault and it was completely avoidable. The next day, the group of us, we were all heading up to the same Georgian border. We got to the Georgian border. There was a bit of faffing about at the border. It took a while, and then we got to the top of the hill. And, instantly Georgia was a lot greener, even greener than the last part of Turkey that we'd cycled through. One thing to note that I immediately noticed in Georgia was dogs became far, far worse. Every single village that you went through, we got chased by dogs. They're not generally trying to actually bite you, but it was just another thing that you've got to worry about for no reason. In the morning, they all were heading into Tbilisi. We said our goodbyes in the morning. I had a really nice ride over down to Vardzia. I think it was about 50 kilometres to these sulphur baths, which my dad had given me the heads up about because he stayed there on his motorbike trip. So had a little ride in and got there fairly early. Immediately went in these baths, and I was like, oh, maybe it'll be like a little bit warm. But it was properly warm and not very sulphury, so you didn't come out smelling like eggs, which I know a lot of sulphur baths you get. The morning after, I had a massive climb up, and it was very long. It was like 1,500 metres up, which took me the best part of the day. So I started at about 9 and got to the top at about 3 o'clock, I think. And on the way up, I was warned about dogs. But the road up was really cool. It was something out of like a Top Gear special type thing, and there was these massive trucks coming down it, and it took me really high up to where all these ski resorts were, and it was quite cool. And I got to the top, and there was a military checkpoint, which I didn't know there was, so that took me by surprise. I gave them my passport, not really knowing what was happening, and it was all cool. And then set back off and went past these shepherds' villages that were right next to the road, which obviously had the dogs. And these dogs spotted me from about half a kilometre away and all ran up to me barking and being really aggressive. And one of them started kind of pawing at the floor and dragging their feet. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is not going very well. They started getting really close, and I just thought, I'm going to have to just go for it. And, this is the worst dog experience I've had on my trip so far. And so I just thought, right, I'm just going to gun it. Started cycling away, and it was really loose gravel, big gravel, so really difficult to cycle on. And these dogs were properly going for my legs to the point where, without even thinking about it, it was just a reflex. I put my feet up onto the top of my frame so that they couldn't bite me, and cycled down this really rocky road, which without suspension and all this kind of stuff, and managed to fly past them, headed down into a little village, and then made my way over to a little camp spot. The morning after, because of the dog experience the day before, I had sent a message to the guys that I was originally cycling with, because they had cycled this same path, and just said, look, did you have any issues with dogs, just so I know kind of where to look out for? And they said, yeah, we had a really bad one as well, like the worst one of their experiences, and they pinned it on the map for me. I only had one little dog experience where they were warding us off. They didn't get too close, which was fortunate, and it was quite nice. And it was really like something out of Mongolia. It was this really rocky road going through the middle of mountains with absolutely nothing there but loads of sheep and shepherds and things. It was really quite a cool experience. I bumped into a bloke from Tbilisi who was on his bike with his son, and he said he had a bike shop and stuff, and gave me information about that in case I needed anything, and said, oh, by the way, there are 2 other lads cycling about 5 kilometres ahead. And I went, oh, that's cool. I'll keep my eye out, thinking they'll probably be too far ahead to catch up. But I made it to the next city where I bumped into them, actually. The 2 lads, same age as me, from Italy, that are cycling to Australia. And I said to them, look, I'm heading roughly the same way. if you don't mind, I'm happy to cycle with you guys. So we stuck together and had a really nice ride. Had a nice evening together and camping and eating and having a beer and stuff, which was really nice. And then brings us to today, where we set back off. We only had about 50 kilometres to go into Tbilisi, and we cycled in together. It was pretty much all down. We had maybe 400 metres of up and then 1,500 metres of downhill. Just kind of cruising down on the bikes into Tbilisi, and then I've got an Airbnb for a week in Tbilisi as my friend is coming to join me for a little bit, so another rest week. But it has been really good so far. Having an amazing time, and I can't recommend this kind of travel enough to anyone who's listening that is thinking of doing it. Definitely go for it.
Listeners, one of the best things about being an independent podcaster is I get to choose the companies which I collaborate with, and I'm all about promoting brands which I actually use. Red White Apparel is one of them. Over the years, I have tried to go chamois-free on my bike adventures and ditch the bib shorts, but every time I have been filled with regret and a lot of discomfort. That means I need solid bib shorts, and Red White have got it right. After 10 years of making nothing else but bib shorts, they have nailed comfort and functionality, including a version which I'm using which makes pee breaks way easier. As a woman, a pee break friendly bib is an absolute non-negotiable. Supporting Red White helps support this podcast, so please head to the link which I've put in the podcast show notes and see what they're all about. Okay, now back to the episode. Thank you so much, Olly. Wow, the experiences that you are continuing to have as you make your way towards Thailand, going through Turkey and now well and truly into Georgia as well. They're absolutely mind-blowing, and I wonder how they marry up with your perceptions of what it would be like before you set off. Something that struck me is just how amazing it has been for you to meet so many different bike travellers from so many different countries and share parts of your journey with them as well. I'm pretty sure that when you're travelling solo and you meet like-minded people taking similar routes through a country, I'm sure it's made for some incredible times just swapping stories and experiences with each other as well. And I've mentioned it before on the podcast, but I'm a big believer that fast friendships happen with bike travellers. And so I'm sure that by the time you actually get to Thailand, you will have come away with so many new friends as well. The other thing was the misadventures that can occur during your bike adventure, and it sounds like you've had a few there to speak of. My goodness, when you were talking about when the bike fell off, when you were hitchhiking to the village to get away from the storm and then having to run back for a kilometre to finally find it and seeing it broken in pieces, my heart sank for you. You sounded like you were down at yourself for being in a bit of a foul mood, but my goodness, Olly, I think you had every reason to be. It sounds like you've got everything fixed now, though, and I'm really thankful for that. Another ever-present theme is the kindness afforded to you by complete strangers. Sounds like you have been invited in for food, for tea, for drinks, for shelter, and the hospitality seems endless there, regardless of the country. Turkey seems to have been absolutely mind-blowing, and it sounds like Georgia has remained the same. The other thing that struck me was just how instantly, as you crossed into Georgia, you noticed the landscape change dramatically. And you were talking about Georgia being quite green compared to where you had gone from. And something that strikes me is that sometimes border crossings, the landscape does become starkly different. I guess that's why the borders are where they are. But I imagine that apart from the visual differences, you've seen slight cultural differences along the way. And that's all part of the fun of the adventure too. And then how could I not discuss the dogs? Oh my goodness. It sounds like my worst nightmare. I am so thankful that you managed to keep your bike upright, that you didn't become dog food as you joked about, and that you got away from that situation. Now, I have heard about the reputation of dogs in Georgia before, and it sounds like you have definitely found this out for yourself, up close and a little bit too personal for what you would have liked. I'm hoping that the dogs that you encounter from here on in will perhaps be a little bit friendlier to you as well. Now, listeners, I have provided links in the show notes to Olly's Instagram account so that you can keep up with his journey on the road. Keep your ears peeled for another update in a few more weeks to come. And until then, I'm wishing you well, Olly. Listeners, I wanted to give a little special shout out to Dara Cronin. Dara is an Irishman and he set off on an adventure to challenge himself. He actually took inspiration from a previous podcast guest, Rob McLennan, and Dara cycled all the way from his home to Cape Town via the route through West Africa. I actually shared a mini episode with Dara while he was in Nigeria. From memory, he was about to cross over into Cameroon. And I just wanted to give an update to say that Dara has made it. Dara made it all the way to Cape Town. Some monumental journey, monumental experiences, no doubt, as well. A big, big congratulations to you, Dara, for taking on something that truly challenged you. And listeners, keep your ears peeled because I am certain that I will be catching up with Dara for a full-length episode to hear all about his experiences as well. I just love the fact that he was following on Rob's journey and decided, you know what, I'm going to take that on as well. And now he has finished it. It always makes me wonder how many people listen to episodes like this or watch people that are traveling their social media and are inspired to do their own journeys. It's a great case of bike adventurers providing inspiration for others to do that as well. And now we come to my favourite part of the show where I get to thank you, my super fans, for being dead set legends and buying me some virtual coffees. Each week these messages and coffee donations come through and it fills my heart with joy. I want to give a shout out to Kelly Beisel, or is it Kelly Beisel? Kelly, I'm sorry for butchering your surname there, but you have said, Bella, this is my absolute favourite podcast, and it has been for years. I've been meaning to buy you a coffee for years as well. Honestly, you and your guests have created something truly special, a space that inspires, encourages, and makes cycling feel real and accessible. I'm older than most listeners, 56 now, with my family raised, a mostly understanding husband, and finally the freedom to explore the world on two wheels. I'm cycling through different corners of the globe. I'm squeezing in every adventure before my body says otherwise. Staying fit and well now has one goal, to keep riding and backpacking as far and as often as I can. Thank you, Bella. You're an absolute legend. Kelly, this message, oh my gosh, it made me feel warm and fuzzy inside. And I love that you are just taking life on with both hands, taking on the adventurous trails, riding your bike to places, backpacking as well by the sounds of it, and not letting the number, which is age, get in the way of you enjoying yourself, seeing more of the world and having an absolute blast of an adventure. Thanks so much for buying me some coffees. You are a legend and a super fan. And listeners, if you want to do as Kelly has done, you can simply go to my Buy Me a Coffee page, which is at buymeacoffee.com/seektravelride. Buy me some virtual coffees and make sure to leave your name and a message letting me know what is it that you love about the podcast and where is your next bike adventure taking you. And until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning into today's episode. Remember, if you're after bib shorts which genuinely keep you comfy for hours on your bike, do yourself a favour and check out Red White Apparel. They spent 10 years obsessing over one product and one product only, and it really shows. I ride in them, I love them, and I think you will too. Plus, by supporting them, you're also supporting Seek Travel Ride. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.